Let's go into leadership, everyone. Get your pens and papers and your journals out there. Now, why do some leaders answer their calling and execute with excellence, while others don't? By the way, these are my notes from the Bible. So as we dive in here, if you're not following along, we're going to give you a PDF on this. If you have questions, go ahead and bring them up at the very end. But these are my notes on the deep dive that I've done into spiritual leadership recently. The other thing that I want to tell you, if you're not exactly where you want to be in life and in business, leadership is your problem and leadership is your solution. You need to be able to lead yourself, and that is self-mastery. If I can't wake up in the morning and get myself out of bed and into a peak state, if I can't look at my day and be excited about it, I'm not leading myself. If challenges come and knock me off of my game, and I want to hide in my office and not do the work that I need to do, that God has called me to do, then leadership is my problem. If my people don't respect me, if they don't communicate with me, if they don't trust me, if they don't follow my direction, if they don't get inspired to take action, then it's my fault. It's a leadership issue. If you're not getting the sales that you want, if the vendors that you're seeking to work with aren't wanting to work with you, if prospective team members are not coming to join you, if your existing team members are not increasing their level of stewardship and productivity on an ongoing basis, it is a leadership problem. Everything rises and falls on leadership. Leadership is your problem, and leadership is your solution if you want to be more successful in life and in business. Now, if you want to think about your leadership or the leadership of another, just inspect the 9 fruits of the Spirit to determine the leader's spiritual maturity. The one that I run into the most with the people that I have stewardship responsibilities for, clients and team members, is the last fruit of the Spirit, which is self-control. You know how many people that I talk to that I'm like, they make a commitment. They're like, I'm not going to eat ice cream for a month. And I'm like, how you doing on that ice cream challenge? And they're like, I couldn't say no at dessert last night. I just couldn't do it. And they're like, I'm going to drink a gallon of water a day. And I'm like, how you doing on that gallon of water a day challenge? They're like, I couldn't do it. Just couldn't get it done. They just don't have self-control. And that's because of an absence of self-mastery. And so a lot of times we have these gurus, and many of them, they're flying off the hook. They're throwing F-bombs left and right. They're talking about their materialism and their money, and they're talking about all kinds of stuff they shouldn't be talking about. They're losing their temper. They're losing their cool. They're even bragging about how they lose their temper and lose their cool. And I'm here to tell you today that if you are a spiritual individual and you want to surround yourself with the person that's on the spiritual path, then you should inspect the leader's fruits of the Spirit. A leader must have a humble and grounded perspective. One of the greatest signs of a spiritual leader is their humility. And the antidote to hubris is humility. And one of the things that I share with the people that I have stewardship over is God uses everything in your life to prepare us for everything in life. So everything going wrong in your life is preparing you for everything that's about to happen in your life. Everything going right in your life is preparing you for what's about to happen. In order to be a successful leader, you have to have self-awareness. Here are some questions that I put together for you to deeply ask yourself, how self-aware are you really? One question is, how do you see yourself? How honest are you with yourself? Now, if a person is lying to themselves, they're surely lying to others. So when a person tells me, oh, I'm going to charge the hill, I'm going to do 10 million in sales next year, and I'm like, you're lying to yourself. That means you're lying to others. When people are like, I'm the best there ever was. Well, I actually know someone who's a little better than you, truthfully. You're lying to yourself. And if you're lying to yourself, you're lying to others. So how honest are you with yourself? Another question is, how do you see others? This is something that I've matured spiritually in. I used to judge people a lot more than I do today. And I used to actually think that as a CEO and a leader of a company, my job was to judge. And now I find myself often having grace and humility and reflecting on my shortcomings as a young leader, as I deal with some of the young leaders that I have the privilege of mentoring. So how do you see others? Are you judging them? Are you criticizing them? Are you condemning them? Are you gossiping about them? Are you complaining about them? Or do you see them as opportunities to grow your leadership and teaching them how to grow their character and their competency? How do others see you? This is an important question that every leader needs to ask. This is why many leadership technologies that are out there, like Strengths Finders and so forth, they're designed to be able to teach people about themselves, but also teach their colleagues and their peers about them as well. This is often what's called 360 feedback. Another question that I ask myself as a spiritual leader is, how does God see me? How does God see me? How does God see the situation that I'm in right now? How does God see your leadership? And how does God see your followers? Now, when you ask these questions, you become more self-aware. The more self-aware you are, the more people can trust you because you're aware of your shortcomings. You're not covering things up, pretending that everything is fine when it's not. You're willing to embrace the honest truth about the situation, and you're willing to humbly admit, I don't know. I made a mistake. I made a bad call. If you're self-aware, you know who you are. And when you know who you are, people will know who you are. A leader may have the power of God in them, but that doesn't mean that they've earned the favor of God. This is an important quote. There's people that you will see that you'll be like, wow, they have the power of God in them. But then you inspect the fruits and you'll realize they don't have the favor of God. God will work through nearly everyone that has a relationship with God. But that doesn't mean that God will give favor to everyone. I've had God work through a homeless person that I walk by. I've had God work through a variety of people that don't have favor because they're not living a life as a leader. Now I have what I call the favor formula. It's really favor formula, but I was thinking like Favor Flav formula, For those of you a little older, you might know what I'm talking about. And this is, I like to do algorithms, so this is a real simple one. If you're not into math, you're going to completely blank out, but if you're into math, you're going to geek out. My formula is purity plus capacity minus ego times obedience times petition equals favor. Now I'm going to explain that. Purity. How pure are you? How innocent and pure are you? And by purity, I mean purifying yourself, cleansing yourself, detoxifying yourself, your thinking, your way of being. By capacity, I mean your God-given capacity. Capacity gets developed. Minus your ego. Your ego is the detriment. Times your obedience. This is important. Now, obedience was a word that I rejected my entire life until 2 weeks ago or so. I picked up the Bible and obedience came to me and I was like, wow, I got to be obedient. What are you talking about? Like, I don't like that word. I'm a rebel. I'm a disruptor. I'm an innovator. I'm a maverick. I'm all these labels that I thought I was. And now I'm like, I'm obedient. That's what I want to be. I want to be obedient. I'm going to talk more about that. Times petition. Now, petition is in prayer when you actually petition God. Say, God, I want to be a better leader. I want to have better character. I need better competency. Please surround me with the people that are going to develop me and grow me and teach me. Please send me the mentors. Please send me the help that I need. Whatever that is, that's petition. And that equals your favor. Because if you don't ask, you won't receive. So you have to petition. So that's my formula. A spiritual leader must resist the temptation to compare themselves to others, as this is like complaining to God. See, God has given you a calling to go build your character and your competency. And you're like, but so-and-so's only 25 years old and he's making $1 million a year and I'm only making 700,000, God. It's like, well, God's trying to convince you to build character and competency. And you're comparing yourself to all of these other people that God has a different relationship with, They have a different capacity. They have a different series of lessons that they need to learn, and they have a different assignment coming to them. And yet we are comparing ourselves to all of these people. It's like telling God, we're not being obedient. We're not grateful for the assignment that we've been given. And so what happens is God doesn't develop, we don't develop, because it's like we build a wall between us and God because we're comparing ourselves to others. It's like complaining to God about the assignment we've been given. Discernment is the strategy when you're obedient. And obedience is the highest form of execution when you're working on behalf of the kingdom of God. Now, when I thought deeply about that changed my life. Obedience is the highest form of execution. Imagine if you and your teams all operated that way, where they were like, all right, what I'm called to do, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it to the very best of my ability. I'm going to have the spirit of service in everything that I do, regardless of whether I want to do it or not, because I know that there's character and competency in the act of me doing it. And I know God has a plan, and who am I to question it? And execution is knowing what to do, how to do it, and then, and I've added this just recently, having the character to do it. Most people can figure out what to do, and they can figure out how to do it, but they lack the character to do it. I see this all the time. There's been many clients that have asked, they have said, Ryan, what should I do? Sales are down, it's inflation, it's recession, this is happening. I say, here's exactly what you need to do. This is exactly how you need to do it. And then they don't do it. And why? Because they lack the character to do it. And you build character one step at a time. Now, this is the doing it framework. For those of you that like to do it and that want to do more of it, want to execute at a higher level, we do it with the spirit of service. It's so important that everything we do with the spirit of service. And our strategy is discernment. And the way we execute is with obedience. The spirit of service is contagious, and this is why we want to have that spirit. It's contagious to your clients, to your team. When you're being of service, everyone around you is going to catch that vibe. It is a frequency. Service is a frequency. In fact, I've had many spiritual leaders walk in my house and say, immediately, I feel the spirit of service. Why? Because I'm offering them a water. I'm trying to make them feel at home. I'm greeting them into my house. I'm welcoming them, and I'm there to be of service. I'm there to give to them. So when you have the spirit of service inside of you, it is contagious. And when we think about one of the greatest leaders in the history of the world, actually, I'm sorry, I'm biased here. The greatest leader in the history of the world here, in my humble opinion. In fact, it's factual. He has 2.6 billion followers without social media. No one else has that many followers. More artists have been inspired by this man. Beethoven, Bach, Da Vinci, Michelangelo. The list goes on and on and on. It's Jesus. He didn't paint. He didn't make music. In fact, there's very few words that we can even attribute to him. Most of it has been said by other people. But he washed his followers' feet. And we'll remember that for eternity. This world will, for as long as humanity exists, we'll remember. I get the chills all over me just telling you this. We will remember that he washed his followers' feet. God's strategy can only be discerned through the lens of obedience. So for those of you who are like, I'm not going to be obedient, I'm going to do this the maverick way. I'm a Titan. I'm a maverick. Well, unfortunately, if you don't come to a relationship with the word obedience, you will never understand God's strategy. And if you aren't successful as an entrepreneur, it's because you lack leadership. Your leadership is your influence. Your influence is the weight of your character, your competency, and your spiritual authority. See, your spiritual authority is every adversity that you've ever overcome. It's every challenge that you've accepted and danced with and gotten through. In fact, your spiritual authority is everything that you have had to work through to develop that character and that competency. Character and competency is hard earned. It is not easy to obtain. And so that's your spiritual authority. That is your power base. And trust is your currency. Your leadership is your spiritual authority, and spiritual authority fuels trust. And trust overcomes fear, and trust creates unity. Trust is like air. When it's present, we don't think about it. When it's absent, we can't think about anything else. I'm going to repeat this. Trust is like air. When it's present, we don't think about it. When it's absent, we can't think about anything else. Think about the first time that you realized you couldn't trust a team member. As a CEO of a company, that keeps me up at night. It stops me from sleeping good. It's the worst thing in the world when all of a sudden I'm like, I don't think I could trust this person. They said they were going to do something and they didn't do it. I no longer believe that I'm going to be able to trust them. Like, if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. And if they say they're going to do something, I expect them to do it, or at least explain to me why they couldn't or what obstacles came in the way. I mean, that happens on my end too. It happens to all of us. But if they said they're going to do something and they didn't do it and they could have, and then they tried to avoid it, minimize it, blame it, or deny it, I can't trust them. If you can't trust them, then you don't have that currency of leadership. The leader must be decisive, but decisions come with unintended consequences. So another job of a leader is to anticipate the unintended consequences and articulate the unintended consequences. This is one that I learned many years back, because when you're running a large organization like I used to, one small decision might, destroy the livelihoods of 1,000 people. In fact, I might allocate compensation to one group of people and wipe out another group of people. And so there's unintended consequences to decisions that you have to fully think through as a leader. Now, many people right now are having a failure to harvest. When we have a failure to harvest, there's two types of failures. It's either character-based or it's competency-based. So when I talk to team members, and let's say they fail to get the result they wanted, I say, was it character? Did you not follow through with what you said you're going to do? Did you not plan accordingly? Did you not exercise discernment and obedience in the execution of your plan? So is it character-based? Did you have too much ego? Did you have overconfidence? Right? Excuse me. That would be character-based. The leader comes to me and says, I didn't get the job done because, the team didn't show up for me. Okay, well, why does your team treat you this way? Why does your team not follow your lead? Why does your team not communicate with you, work as hard as they possibly can, and try to deliver for you? Is it because you've demonstrated poor character around them and they think that it's okay for them to have poor character too? Or is it because you lack competency? And by competency, I mean, maybe you're in over your head. You thought you could do something and you don't know how to do it. And oftentimes it's correlated to a lack of character because you didn't ask for help, and that's an issue of character. You didn't dive into the books or stay up all night long reading the owner's manual or whatever it is. And so as a result, the project failed, the product failed, the plan failed because of a competency issue. Either way, it's one or the other. And when a person comes to me and says, I didn't get the result that I thought I would, I just tell them, which is it, character, competency, or both? And then I ask them to write down from the failure all that they learned about their character and all that they learned about their competency. Because I can forgive them, and I forgive very easily. Like, it's effortless for me to forgive. And it's very important to forgive. But we don't want them to forget the lessons that they've learned from it. So we want to make sure that they're inspecting their character deeply and their competency deeply with each time that they fail. And then the failure isn't a failure anymore. It's feedback, and that feedback then is transmuted from dark to light. Another thing I want to share with you, and this is constantly found in the Bible in a number of different stories, is God is using your detours and your delays to build your character and your competency. So if you're not where you want to be, growth-wise, revenue-wise, profits-wise, it's a detour or it's a delay. And why? Because You need to build character and competency. And that's why you're here. That's what the Advocate program is made for. It's to help you build your character and your competency. This is what small groups are for. This is what the library and the Advocate program of 120 plus past sessions is for. This is what TAP is for. This is what Spiritual Warrior Society is for. This is what our retreats are for. Because if you're building your character and your competency, your business is going to grow as well. Your character and your competency is a reflection of the inside of you, and your business is a reflection of the outside of you. Spiritual leadership is a lifelong pursuit. Spiritual leaders are not self-made or self-appointed. I used to walk around proudly saying I was self-made. And now I realize humbly, God has a special way of humbling his proud children like myself. And I now look back at God's work and I'm like, wow, I didn't build that company. God did. I didn't do that. That was God. I see God everywhere. And one of my favorite quotes, many of you might have heard this before, but I figured I'd share it here tonight, is God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. I am shocked that I'm here to talk about biblical and spiritual leadership here today. I remember being in a jail cell in juvenile hall, and I was in solitary confinement. I was locked into it for 20 days. And I was preparing for a sentencing hearing where I thought I was going to get 4 years. The only book they would allow me to have in there was the Bible. I wasn't a very good reader, bad attention deficit disorder. And so I'd start reading it and I'd be like off thinking about something else. Start reading it and off thinking about something else. So the only way that I could read it was to read it out loud, because that's the only way I could train my attention. And as I heard my voice echoing as I was reading the Bible, I remember thinking, am I going to become a preacher? Am I going to become a pastor of sorts? Like, nah, that can't happen. I was a gang member. Like, they'll never let me in the church. Like, not a chance. And now I'm sitting here today, many years later, realizing that was a prophetic moment in my life, where I realized that I was going to become a teacher and a preacher. And that's what I'm here today to do. And that's because God qualified me. I did not qualify myself. I didn't come from a spiritual tradition. I didn't go to seminary school. You know, I'm not the most active churchgoer on the planet. I haven't been an active reader of the Bible. That wasn't like, my discipline. I'm much more now. And it's because God has just constantly qualified me throughout my journey as a leader. And the goal of a spiritual leader is to finish well and to be laser focused on finishing well. And what I mean by that is, if you look out, as I did in the meditation, and you go to the very end of your days and you think about, how are you going to finish this soul's purpose and this soul's mission? Are you going to finish with relationships all around you? Are you going to finish knowing that you fulfilled your soul's purpose and you made an impact and you left behind leaders upon leaders upon leaders and generations of leaders? And that to me is finishing well. And that's what we should be laser focused on. Moses had to wander around in the desert for 40 years. And even prior to that, 40 years until he received his calling. I have people that'll tell me, like, I don't want to do this job anymore. I'm like, you've been doing it for 30 days. Moses had to do this for 40 years, and he still didn't get to the promised land. Why? Because he didn't have the character and the competency to take action on going to the promised land when the call was made. So he had to go back and wander around some more. And so that lesson should teach us that we need to be ready for when the call happens, right? We need to prepare ourselves for when the call happens. Leaders who finish well grow their spiritual authority to the very end. They grow their character and their capacity endlessly until their very last day. They have a vibrant and intimate relationship with God, and they practice purposeful discipline. Your work should be your testimony to faithful service. Repeat this. Your work should be your testimony to faithful service. And by work, I mean this presentation. I mean the email that you're going to send tonight. I mean the text message that you're going to send to a colleague. I mean the responsiveness that you have to a person that you have a relationship with, whether it be a client or a vendor. It should be a testament to your faithful service. They should see in your responsiveness a level of responsibility that only comes through faithful service. An altar call, personally, is my testimony to faithful service. And I share that with you because this is my life's work and my life's testimony to faithful service. It is a brand new movement. It's going on 3 years old. We'll be celebrating at our Spiritual Warrior Retreat in October. As a spiritual movement, that's like 1 day old. You know, I was reading in the Bible how Jesus trained the disciples for 3 years, and he's a far better teacher than I am, by all means. I'm not even close in comparison. And it still took the disciples, who were pretty smart themselves, 20 years after Jesus was resurrected to get it right and to figure it out and to start spreading and discipling. So I'm here to tell you that I hope that my team gets it much sooner than 20 years, and I hope I'm able to witness it in my lifetime. But this is my lifetime testimony to faithful service. And I am eternally grateful that you're participating in this venture with me. Your dollars get invested into us adding team members, us expanding the movement, us helping those people that can't help themselves, and us continuing to grow this. So I see you not just as a client, but I see you truly as an investor in this movement, because it is because of your participation in the movement that we are able to continue to grow and expand as we are. And so I'm blessed to call you a friend and to be able to serve you. And it is a miracle that we get to do this work together. And so I'm in deep, eternal gratitude for you, to you, for being a part of this movement. Now, how to accelerate your spiritual growth as a leader? Number one, seek out a mentor. Number two, cultivate authentic relationships. Number three, enlist accountability partners. Number three is very important. Number four, invite your accountability partners to ask you about your personal time with God and what you're doing to keep growing. As men, oftentimes we're with our friends and we're like too cool to talk about God. As business leaders, we're way too cool to bring up God. I saw it. I walked into a room and I was like, I'm bringing the Holy Spirit into this room. That's my speech. And I went in, I had a slide deck and a video, and the video didn't get played and the slide deck didn't show up. And so I just went off the cuff and brought the Spirit in the room. 45 minutes later, I'm watching people basically giving me amens and saying like, this is exactly what their soul needed, was somebody to infuse spirituality into business. When we first started this movement, people were thinking like it was crazy. You're going to do what? You're going to bring spirituality into business? And now I see movement after movement after movement getting started, bringing spirituality to business. And so I'll tell you, God's hand is at work here. And number five is we want to process life with our accountability partners in a transparent conversations in order to help you maintain your perspective. Now, how to know if you've developed spiritual authority? Number one sign that you've developed spiritual authority is you weep for others more than you worry for yourself. I'm going to repeat this. I know so many entrepreneurs that are worried about themselves. They have teams. I'm like, worry about your team. If your team isn't making money, that's a problem. If your team is healthy and making money and being successful and happy at work, you're going to be just fine. In fact, the more that your team does well, the better you do. The more that you weep for others. And by weep, I mean, you're praying for them. You're having empathy for them. You're having compassion for them. You're wanting them to develop and grow into the best leaders that they can be. But most often as leaders, we spend too much time worrying about ourselves. We have these huge teams and we're worrying all about ourselves all the time. And that's a lack of spiritual maturity. As you develop spiritual maturity, you'll start spending more time thinking about others than yourself. If God called you to lead people, He has called you to pray for and with those people. When I first started Altar Call, I was working with leader Gerard Adams, and he'd never really prayed in a business setting before. And he's like, "Are you sure we should be doing this?" And now this guy's leading spiritual movements and praying with everyone, and he infuses prayer into every meal, and it's a beautiful thing to witness. And it took me saying, "No, this is what we're going to do. We're going to pray." And I prayed with you guys in the meditation today. And what you might not know is every time I do a meditation at the very end, when I quit talking, I'm sending a prayer out for each and every single one of you connecting to the meditation. I also pray prior to it, because we grow people by engaging them in spiritual experiences. This is why we do our retreats the way we do, where we practice the modalities. We bring in, new leaders into the movement like Sonia Lee, and we have another new leader that's going to come and do a phenomenal work with us, and Tara, and all of the leaders that are part of this movement, because we're going to engage in spiritual experiences together. And as you know, when two or more are gathered, miracles happen. Literally miracles happen. And so we bring the Holy Spirit to business is what we do. And when we do these retreats, we bring your angels, your ancestors in heaven, your spiritual family, my spiritual family, and we got thousands of us together doing this work together, elevating humanity and the consciousness of it. And so our retreats are deep spiritual experiences. Anyone who's ever come to them will tell you that. And each time we do it, we try to go deeper and deeper and deeper to plant those seeds of the Holy Spirit as firmly as we possibly can. And it is my intention here tonight to transfer that light onto you. Now, spiritual leadership, I'm going to teach you a quick hack in spiritual leadership called the positive feedback loop. A positive feedback loop is a set of exercises that you do that become self-perpetuating, like an object that stays in motion and continues in motion. And one of the positive feedback loops that I love to do is I pray for my team. And when you pray for your team, that means that you go deeper into your level of responsibility. And the more that you go deeper into your level of responsibility, God gives you more responsibility. He gives you more burden because you're capable of receiving more burden. And as you do that, you pray more. And so you pray for your team, your responsibility increases. And as your responsibility increases, if you're like me, you got to pray more, because I'm like, oh, wow, I didn't realize I got 20 new team members now I got to pray for, right? So the more people I have, the more I got to pray, because my prayers are pretty long now. I got hundreds of clients I pray for, and I've prayed for each and every single one of you over the past couple of days. I've got private clients I'm praying for and praying with. I've got team members I'm praying for and praying with. I got family members I'm praying for and praying with. I got friend members I'm praying for and praying with. I got spiritual warriors I'm praying for and praying with. So, the more my responsibility increases, the more I have to pray. And the more that I pray, the more my team increases, both in their capacity and in their numbers. And the more that they increase their capacity and their numbers, the more responsibility I have. And the more responsibility I have, the more I have to pray. That's what's called a positive feedback loop. Deploy positive feedback loops in your life. Another item that I've extracted from my biblical research is that leaders must take risks. Risk-adverse discipleship is unbiblical. In fact, there are a number of stories where the leader didn't take the risk and didn't become all that they could have become. There's a number of stories in the Bible where the leader was destined to become successful, but they didn't take the risk. And that's why Moses had to wander in the desert for 40 years. He sent out 12 spies. 2 of them came back and said, "We discovered the promised land. It has milk and honey." 10 of them spread worry of risk. They said, "Oh, the land is filled with giants." And as a result, fear spread throughout the community, and they didn't enter the promised land. And so they had to wander for 40 years. And that was a story that was designed to teach us about not being risk adverse. But I know many, many leaders in business that are afraid to take the risk. They're terrified about hiring somebody. I'm like, hire the person. They're like, well, I'm going to wait. They think that, there's an old saying, like, the greater the risk, the greater the reward. They think it's opposite. It's like you get the reward and then you take the risk. Well, once I have $100,000 in the bank, then I'll hire the person. It's like, no, you got to hire the person to get the $100,000 in the bank. Once you hire the person and you take the risk, that means you're expanding the vessel. That means you're telling God, I have faithfulness. I believe you. I trust you. I'm willing to take the risk. And I know that you will provide a reward. And if you don't provide the reward, and monetary means you're going to provide a reward in the increasing of my character or the increasing of my competency. And as a result of my character getting stronger and my competency getting stronger, I will certainly get the reward. And this is one of my favorite quotes by Henry Ford. If you need a machine and you don't buy it, you eventually end up paying for the machine and you don't have it. In business, I've seen this happen so often. They're like, we'll buy the software, in the next budget cycle. We'll get mentorship after we, get through this weak spot in the business. We're in the middle of a crisis right now. We don't want to pay for mentorship. I hear prospects say this stuff all the time. And I'm like, you're going to pay for the mentorship. You're just not going to get the mentorship. Right? So like you could pay for the mentorship and you can get the mentorship, or you're going to pay for the mentorship and you're not going to get it because you're going to learn these character and these competency lessons one way or the other. You can go with me and I'll teach it to you the easy way, or you can go the hard way. But you're going to pay for it either way. And by pay for it, I've paid for more of this than you can imagine. By pay for it, I mean, you know how many times I've said, oh no, I don't want to spend the money on rolling out, software, for example, CRM, or I don't want to spend the money on ads or whatever. It's like, you're going to pay for those ads. You're going to pay for not executing. You're going to pay for not hiring. You're going to pay for not buying the machine, but you're not going to actually get the machine. You're not going to actually get the people on the team. That quote, when I heard that, it hit me hard because there's been plenty of times where I've said, no, I don't want to spend the money on that. And then I end up paying for it anyways, and I don't get the value that I would have had I spent the money. Failure to discover your calling is failure to advance God's kingdom. That really resonated with me when I read that. I thought to myself, wow, all kinds of people come to us because they don't know what their purpose is. And if you don't discover what your purpose is, and by the way, that discovery process is ongoing. Rarely does a person get their entire purpose early. You get hints and clues, and the further you go, the further you see. And as you develop that purpose, new assignments come and your purpose evolves. But remember this, failure to discover your calling is failure to advance God's kingdom. Every act of obedience is an act of spiritual warfare. Every act of obedience is an act of spiritual warfare. There are dark forces at work that are trying to convince you not to pray. Every time you pray, that's an act of obedience. That's an act of spiritual warfare. That's why we call our spiritual warrior society, spiritual warrior society. Because every time you watch one of those videos, it's an act of obedience. It's saying, God, I could watch Netflix. I could watch pornography. I could watch the news. But I choose to watch a video on leadership. I choose to read the Bible. I choose to meditate. I choose to better myself. I could eat terrible and wake up, or drink terrible and wake up hungover tomorrow. But I choose to be pure so that I can be clear tomorrow. And that act of obedience is an act of spiritual warfare. Another thing when it comes to risk is don't save the seeds if your mission is to produce fruit. God will give your seeds to someone who will. Repeat that. Don't save the seeds if your mission is to produce fruit. God will give your seeds to someone who will. I see this happen a lot. A leader gets like 100,000 in the bank. They land a big deal. They're like, wow, I was worried. I prayed. I begged God, I petitioned God. I begged for help. I was worried about paying my rent, my bills, my team. I get the 100,000 in the bank. I'm not doing anything. I'm saving those seeds. And then next thing you know, a few months later, I'm on the phone with them. I'm like, how you doing? And they're like, I'm broke again. Why? Because they didn't invest the seeds. And so the seeds are gone, and now they're back into that same repetitive cycle. And that's because God seeks to humble leaders. If you have an ego in your relationship with God, you will be humbled. I have been to events and I've seen people just proudly boasting of their ego, and I have made that mistake a million times. And I stand here today humbled because of it. And I do not want more humbling, so I do my best to constantly work on this. And know that the antidote to hubris is humility, and that overconfidence amplifies temptation. And overconfidence is a bigger problem than incompetence. See, success can create overconfidence. That's why we want to be humble, admit to luck, admit to timing, especially God's. Give all glory to God. The more humble we are, and genuinely humble, not just paying lip service to it, the less overconfident we become. And like I said, when you're overconfident, you get tempted by all kinds of things. And realize this as leaders. It's not where you are, your money, your success, and your status. It's who you are that matters. So quit paying attention to the watch you're wearing and your Louis bags and your status symbols. And I know so many young leaders that are all caught up in status symbols. And I know because I was a Ferrari driving, watch collecting, art collecting, show off. And I thought that those status things are what made me who I was. I thought that's what attracted people to my leadership. And now I know at a soul level, it was never that. In fact, that probably annoyed more good people than it attracted good people. It's who you are that matters. And that's what leadership is about. And remember that symbolism of status becomes obstacles of service. Sorry, symbols of status become obstacles of service. Focus on the calling. Focus on the work, not on yourself. To be humble, pay tribute to God and His divine timing and the contribution of others. By contribution of others, pay tribute to the people that have contributed to your success. When you pray before that meal, pay tribute to the people that delivered it, that put it on trucks, that picked it, that grew it. Pay tribute to all of the people that are involved in delivery of your technology, your electricity, the materials that you drive with, the materials in your home. Pay tribute to the people around you that have contributed to your success, even those people that you don't directly know, the indirect contributors to your success. That's a level of humility, to really go deep and to think about, like, wow, whoever had to build this house, they must have worked really hard. Because of their hard work, I now have the privilege of being able to teach to you. There are many people that I've never met and never will meet that have contributed to my success. Secure leaders have nothing to hide and nothing to prove. Another quote that I read recently that I wanted to share with you, I love, is the best way to find out if you have a servant's heart is to see how you feel when someone treats you like one. A lot of times I have team members, when we're doing our experiences like our spiritual warrior retreat, some team members are not used to being of service. And, I'm doing dishes, I'm moving dishes around, I'm helping out as much as I possibly can. And other people are not used to that. It's like, no, that's a servant's heart. Manual labor is an important aspect of everyone's life. You need to work with your hands. You need to do manual labor in order for you to humble yourself and keep yourself grounded. If you find yourself saying, I was wrong and I don't know often, then you are a humble leader. I know many leaders that struggle with saying that they are wrong or that they don't know. I learned this lesson early on in the boardroom. A mentor told me, Ryan, just say you don't know. And it was my lack of humility that stopped me from saying that. But when I realized that it actually was a tactic that worked much better than exaggerating or fabricating or BSing, I'll not use the curse word that I wanted to use, but I realized that just saying I don't know was one of the most secure things that you could do. Or I made a mistake. I missed it. Bad call. Another thing that we need to do as leaders is we need to be aware of busyness. I know many leaders that talk to me about their busyness, their activity. And I'll often cite the quote that insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That's what a busy, focused leader is doing. See, God never gives you too much to do. We do that to ourselves and we allow others to do it to us. Influence must produce action, and leaders must get followers to buy in and act out. So if you're super busy, you're not working with your team effectively. If you're overloaded, it's because you've done it to yourself and you don't have the space for God. And I've done a lot of work when I shared with you the time breakdown that Sonia Lee walked me through, and I shared with you my version of what she taught me. I realized I wasn't making space for God. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I was so excited to invite Sonia Lee onto the team, was because I wanted to bring on additional leaders so that I could make that space. And know that the gap between your knowledge and your obedience is the size of your spiritual maturity. The smaller the gap, the bigger your spiritual power is. Leaders must have good judgment. The most important asset a leader can have is good judgment. We make 226 decisions a day on food alone. I read this in a recent study that we make 35,000 decisions a day. Start by becoming aware of the decisions you're making and do your best to elevate each one of them. If you're making a bad decision on food, you're going to make other bad decisions. If you can't make a good decision when it comes to your food, how are you going to make a good decision when it comes to more important things? So I use that as a small example of where we should look at when it comes to our judgment. If we can't exercise judgment and we can't exercise self-control, we'll never be able to fully become the leader that God has destined us to be. And that's what, leadership is all about. It's about, it's about serving in the marketplace. And the better leader you are, the more that you're able to serve. The question isn't whether you will have to make hard calls as a leader, but whether you will be ready to. And during those times of crisis, leaders lead into their values. So you must have them written down. And if you haven't written down your values, if you're brand new to us, we have a whole lesson on that. And always remember that open and closed doors are God's way of guiding us. A lot of times, a door will close in front of me, and I used to not understand this. I'd be like, I don't understand why that door just closed. And now I realize why. I'm not supposed to go that way. And that's why discernment is the best strategy, because when the door closes, your discernment tells you, I need to be guided another way. Judgment about people, strategy, and crisis have the greatest impact on the survival and impact of any organization. Let me repeat that. Judgment about people, strategy, and crisis have the greatest impact on the survival and impact of any organization. The spiritual caller of a leader is to recruit and develop other leaders. And feedback is key. Feedback is critical to a leader's self-awareness. It helps others develop a story of us. Insecure leaders minimize, blame, justify, and deny when given feedback. The gap between what we meant to say and do and what we did say and do is our greatest blind spot. And ask for feedback on your blind spots. Leadership is a gift. As leaders, we must pray, study, obey, and teach, and rinse and repeat. And in summary, on leadership, be self-aware and don't compare. Be brave and take risks. Be obedient and execute. Be devoted and purposeful. Be one with the spirit of service. Be humble and open to feedback. Build character and competency consistently. Beware of blind spots and sin spots. Beware of busyness. Exercise excellent judgment. Inspire others to action. Recruit, retain, and remove those people that are not meant for your stewardship. Repent restore, and renew, and be laser focused on finishing well. That concludes our leadership summary for tonight.